The sun was barely rising, casting pale light over the dusty streets of the small town. The air was cold, and a thin layer of fog hung in the corners of the alleys. Maria walked slowly, her thin coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, trying to shield herself from the morning chill. Her stomach was empty, a constant, gnawing reminder of the harsh reality she faced every day. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by exhaustion and worry. She had been on her own for a long time, and life had taught her in the hardest ways that survival often meant making impossible choices. For Maria, today was no different. She had spent the previous night wandering the streets, searching for something to eat, something to survive. The soup kitchens had run out, the shelters were full, and even the neighbors who used to care had long stopped noticing her. She clenched her fists, trying to hold back the rising despair. She knew she had to find a way to survive today, just like she had yesterday and the day before that. But hope felt distant, almost impossible to reach. Maria's life had not always been like this. She remembered faintly a time when she had a small home with her family. Her mother had laughed in the kitchen while cooking. Her father had come home with stories of his day. And the small garden behind their house had bloomed with flowers in the spring. But those days had ended abruptly. A series of misfortunes, her father's illness, her mother's passing, and the loss of their house had left her alone. She had nowhere to turn, and each day had become a fight against hunger, cold, loneliness. As she walked along the empty streets, Maria thought about the choices she had made to survive so far. She had done small jobs here and there, cleaning houses, delivering groceries, carrying packages, but none of it had been enough. No matter how hard she worked, the rent, the bills, the food, it all seemed impossible to cover. Her energy was fading. Her hope was fading. And she could feel desperation creeping into every corner of her mind. Maria knew that today might require her to make a choice she had never imagined making before. She had seen it happen to others, women and men, who had been forced to compromise their dignity just to survive. The thought made her heart ache, but hunger was a stronger voice than pride. She told herself that this was not about giving up. This was about living another day. She reminded herself that survival was not shameful, that sometimes life demanded sacrifices no one should have to make. Her journey took her to the marketplace. Now quiet with the morning's early light, the stalls were mostly empty, except for a few merchants arranging their goods. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery reached her, making her stomach twist painfully. She stopped for a moment, closing her eyes and imagining the warm bread in her hands just for a second. The thought was brief, but enough to remind her how much she had lost, and how far she had come just to make it to this morning. As she wandered through the market, Maria's eyes fell on a man standing near one of the corners, watching the street with calm, careful attention. He seemed ordinary at first glance, but something about him made her pause. Perhaps it was the way he carried himself, or the quiet strength in his gaze. For a moment, Maria hesitated, unsure if she should approach him. Hunger made her bold, but fear kept her cautious. She had learned that strangers could be both saviors and threats, depending on the day, depending on their mood, depending on luck. Maria's thoughts raced. She imagined the possibilities. Maybe this man had food to spare. Maybe he could offer her shelter. Maybe he could help her find a way to survive today. And yet, she could not ignore the voice in her head, the one that whispered warnings about the risks of trusting someone unknown. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling hands and heart. Hunger was growing urgent, demanding action. She had no choice but to take a step forward, to approach him, even though her pride and fear begged her to turn away. As she moved closer, she rehearsed the words she might say, the ways she might ask for help. Her mind raced with different scenarios, each more desperate than the last. The truth of her situation pressed on her chest like a heavy weight. She needed help. She had to ask for it in whatever way she could. Maria's pulse quickened as she prepared herself. She tried to imagine that he would see her as a person, not just as someone desperate. She hoped, against hope, that there might still be kindness left in the world. The man noticed her approach and gave a small, polite nod. Maria stopped in her tracks, uncertain. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to start. Words felt inadequate to describe her hunger, her fear, her loneliness. The silence stretched, heavy and tense, as she struggled to find courage. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Betraying both vulnerability and determination, she did not ask for much, only enough to survive the day. But in that moment, she also felt the weight of her past decisions, the shame of desperation, and the fear of judgment. Her mind flashed back to all the times she had felt powerless. All the nights she had cried herself to sleep, all the moments she had wished for someone to see her not as a burden but as a human being. She could not predict what the man would do, whether he would help or turn her away, but she had to try. The man looked at her with a steady gaze, unshaken by her words or her vulnerability. Maria felt her chest tighten. She had prepared herself for rejection, ridicule, or exploitation, but he said nothing immediately. Instead, he observed her, listening, weighing her words. In his silence, Maria felt both dread and hope. She realized that the next moment could change everything. It could be the end of her hope or the beginning of a new chance. Maria's eyes filled with tears, not just from hunger but from the sheer intensity of her emotions. She had never felt so exposed, so raw, so fragile. And yet, she had never felt more alive, more human, than in this moment of vulnerability. She understood that survival sometimes demanded courage, and courage was not the absence of fear but the willingness to face it. She prayed silently that this man would understand, that he would see her not as a desperate figure, but as someone who deserved compassion. As the minutes stretched, Maria's heart pounded. She felt as if time had slowed, every sound in the market amplified, the distant clatter of carts, the rustle of fabric from the stalls, the soft murmur of people beginning their day. And then, finally, the man spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and unexpectedly kind. He did not judge her, did not laugh, did not dismiss her. He simply acknowledged her presence, her words, and her humanity. In that moment, Maria felt something she had not felt in years: relief, hope, and a glimmer of trust. She realized that survival did not always have to come at the cost of dignity. She realized that kindness could exist even in the harshest conditions. And she realized, more than anything, that life could still hold moments of grace. Even when everything else seemed lost, Maria did not know what the day would bring, or whether her troubles were truly over. But as she walked beside the man, guided by his quiet presence, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the world was not entirely cruel. Perhaps there was still room for humanity, even in desperation. And for the first time in a long while, Maria believed that she might survive today, not through compromise, not through fear, but through courage, trust, and the quiet power of kindness. Maria walked beside the man, her steps hesitant at first, her eyes constantly shifting between him and the empty streets around them. She could still feel the tremor of fear and relief running through her body. His presence was calm, yet strong, and there was a quiet reassurance in the way he carried himself. She did not know his name, and she did not ask. For now, it was enough that he was there, offering help without demanding anything in return. The man guided her to a small cafe tucked into a quiet corner of the town. It was not a grand place. The paint on the walls was chipped, the chairs were uneven, but it was warm, and the smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled the air. Maria's stomach rumbled again, a reminder of the hunger that had been gnawing at her since morning. She felt a surge of gratitude, but also a strange hesitance. She had expected kindness to come with strings attached, but so far, there had been none. The man ordered 2 cups of tea and a small plate of food. He gestured for her to sit, and Maria did so, feeling awkward in her worn-out clothes and tired body. She had not been treated like this in a long time, with respect, dignity, and patience. It was a feeling both unfamiliar and comforting. She wanted to speak, to explain her situation, but words seemed inadequate to capture the depth of her struggles. Instead, she simply accepted the cup he placed in front of her, the warmth of it seeping into her cold hands as she took a small sip. Maria noticed the way he looked at her, not with judgment, not with pity, but with careful attention. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding her, and this surprised her. She had grown used to being ignored or dismissed, as if her problems were invisible. And yet here he was, listening. Just listening. It felt like a rare gift, and Maria felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, afraid of revealing too much, but grateful for the feeling nonetheless. The man spoke gently, asking about her day, her work, and her life. Maria hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She did not want to burden him with her troubles, yet the honesty of her situation demanded telling. Slowly, she began to speak, starting with the small details, how she had wandered the streets, searching for food, and how difficult it had been to find shelter. She spoke of the cold nights, the empty stomachs, the endless struggle just to survive. He listened patiently, nodding occasionally, never interrupting, never judging. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt heard. She realized that sharing her story did not make her weak. In fact, it gave her a sense of relief she had almost forgotten existed. She felt a strange connection forming, one built on understanding and quiet trust. It was a connection she had not expected, and yet it felt natural. As the conversation continued, Maria found herself revealing more than she had intended. She spoke of her family, her past, and the hardships that had shaped her life. She told him about her mother's laughter, her father's stories, and the warmth of their small home before misfortune had taken it all away. Her voice trembled at times, but he remained attentive, his expression calm and reassuring. She could sense that he did not see her as weak or desperate. He saw her as someone who had endured and survived, someone worthy of respect. After a while, he shifted the conversation gently, asking about her hopes and dreams. Maria paused, unsure if she even had any left. Survival had consumed so much of her life that dreams seemed like distant memories, almost foreign. But as she spoke, she realized that there were still small hopes tucked away inside her, hopes for stability, for safety, for a life where she did not have to worry constantly about hunger or shelter. He listened with care, nodding, never offering empty promises, but giving her a sense that her dreams mattered. The man then told her a little about himself. He was not wealthy, nor was he someone of great influence. He had simply learned that helping others in need was a responsibility, not a favor. He had seen many people struggle, and he had made it his mission to offer assistance where he could, without taking advantage or expecting repayment. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. Maria felt a warmth in her chest, a spark of hope that perhaps not everyone in the world sought to exploit the vulnerable. The meal arrived. Maria hesitated before taking the first bite. Hunger had made her cautious, as though food offered by strangers always carried hidden intentions. But there were none. The bread was warm, the tea soothing, and each bite reminded her that nourishment could come without compromise. She savored it slowly, letting the flavors and warmth fill her senses, letting herself feel safe, if only for a moment. After finishing, Maria felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. She wanted to understand more about this man who had shown such unexpected kindness. She asked him why he helped, why he had not taken advantage of her vulnerability. He looked at her with a calm smile and said simply, "Everyone deserves respect. No one should have to give up their dignity to survive." The words resonated deeply within Maria. She realized that what she had thought, it's impossible, receiving help without sacrificing herself, was, in fact, possible. The day continued with small acts of care. He guided her to a nearby shelter where she could rest safely for the night. It was not luxurious, but it was clean and secure. For the first time in months, Maria did not fear the darkness, the cold, or the empty streets. She had a place to stay, even if only for a short while, and that alone felt miraculous. She realized that her trust, once hesitant, could be rebuilt. One small step at a time. While at the shelter, Maria reflected on her journey so far. She thought about the moments of despair, the nights spent alone, the hunger that had gnawed at her spirit. And now, she thought about the man who had changed the course of her day, who had shown her that survival did not have to come at the cost of dignity. She felt a sense of gratitude she could barely put into words. Gratitude for kindness, for patience, and for the possibility of hope. As the evening fell, the shelter quieted, and Maria prepared for sleep. She felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet contentment she had not known in a long time. She knew that tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But she also knew that she had support, guidance, and, perhaps most importantly, a reminder that humanity still existed in unexpected forms. She drifted to sleep with a heart lighter than it had been in years. Carrying the warmth of kindness and the hope of a better day, the next morning, Maria woke with renewed determination. She knew that survival required resilience, courage, and careful choices. But she also understood something new, that help could come without exploitation. Trust could exist even after betrayal, and that honor and dignity were not sacrifices, but treasures to be protected. The lessons of yesterday would guide her today. She prepared to face the world with cautious optimism and renewed hope. Through that day, Maria began to see her surroundings differently. The streets, which had once seemed cruel and empty, now held potential. She noticed small gestures of kindness from strangers, a smile from a shopkeeper, a nod from a passerby, and felt a sense of connection to the world that had been absent before. Her perspective shifted, and she realized that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about recognizing and accepting moments of goodness wherever they appeared. Maria's journey. That day was slow, careful, and thoughtful. She walked with awareness, understanding that every decision mattered. And at the back of her mind, she carried the memory of the man who had shown her that compassion could be real. That integrity could exist even in desperate situations, and that survival could be achieved without losing oneself. By evening, Maria had made a plan. She would continue to seek work, help others where she could, and remember the lessons she had learned. She realized that her story was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that she had a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. The day had been filled with small victories, quiet kindness, and the beginnings of trust, all of which gave her courage to face tomorrow. And so, Maria's life began to change, not through grand gestures or sudden fortune, but through the quiet acts of one person who saw her worth. Her story continued, shaped by resilience, hope, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, humanity could shine through, guiding her toward a brighter future. The days that followed were unlike anything Maria had experienced in a long time. Each morning, she woke with a sense of cautious optimism, a feeling she had almost forgotten. She had learned that survival could come without sacrificing her dignity, and the man's unwavering respect for her offered a new perspective on life. But even with this newfound hope, Maria's heart carried the lingering weight of past hardships. She knew the world could be unforgiving, and trust could easily be misplaced. Still, she was willing to take the risk for the first time in years. One morning, as Maria walked through the market with the man, she noticed the streets were busier than usual. Merchants were setting up their stalls, children ran laughing past her, and the scent of fresh bread and fruit filled the air. It was a lively scene, yet Maria could not ignore the anxiety that tugged at her heart. She had grown accustomed to being invisible, to moving quietly through life so as not to draw attention to her struggles. But now, walking beside him, she felt both seen and strangely vulnerable. A group of men approached the stall, where the man had stopped to speak with a vendor. Maria noticed their gaze linger on her, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. She had seen this look before, curiosity mixed with judgment, an unspoken assumption that she might be desperate or weak. Her stomach tightened with fear, and she instinctively stepped back. Feeling exposed and uncertain, the man, noticing her discomfort, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he said softly. "Nothing will happen to you." His calm demeanor helped steady her trembling hands. Maria looked at him, a mixture of relief and lingering fear in her eyes. She had come to trust him, but the world outside their small bubble of kindness still held dangers she could not control. The men began to speak, their voices loud enough for Maria to hear. They made crude suggestions, assuming that she might be willing to do whatever it took to survive. Maria's heart raced, and panic threatened to overtake her. She felt trapped, vulnerable, and exposed, exactly what she had feared. For a moment, she thought that all her progress, all her hope, might crumble in an instant. But then the man stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the strangers. "Back off," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority and calm strength. "She is not here for anyone's amusement. Leave her alone." The men looked at him, surprised by his confidence. Then, after a tense moment, muttered under their breath and walked away. Maria could hardly believe what had just happened. Her heart was still pounding, but relief washed over her in waves. She realized in that moment that the man's protection was not just about kindness or offering food. It was about preserving her dignity and safety in a world that often threatened both. They continued their walk, and Maria felt a strange mixture of gratitude and amazement. She had known fear all her life, but she had never experienced the power of true protection. She understood, in a way she never had before, that respect could be stronger than fear, and that courage could be quiet, yet decisive. The man did not boast about his actions, nor did he make a spectacle of them. He simply acted, guided by principle and compassion. As the day went on, Maria began to reflect on the events of the morning. She realized that many people might have taken advantage of her vulnerability, and many might have judged her harshly for being alone, struggling, and desperate. But this man had done neither. He had recognized her humanity and defended it. Not for recognition, not for reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The realization warmed her heart and strengthened her resolve. Over the following days, Maria noticed that the bond between her and the man was growing stronger. She began to feel safe in ways she had not felt for years. She could express herself without fear of ridicule, share her thoughts without anxiety, and exist without the constant pressure to protect herself from harm. It was a subtle transformation, quiet and steady, but profound. She began to see herself not merely as someone struggling to survive, but as a person worthy of care and respect. One afternoon, they visited a small library in the town. Maria had always loved reading, but poverty had prevented her from having books or quiet places to learn. The library was modest, with wooden shelves and worn books, but it offered a sanctuary. The man encouraged her to browse, and for the first time in years, Maria allowed herself to imagine a life beyond immediate survival. She opened books, ran her fingers along the pages, and felt her mind expanding. She realized that education and knowledge could be tools for a future she had long thought impossible. As they left the library, Maria noticed the man observing her carefully. "You have a strong mind," he said gently. "Don't let the hardships of the past make you forget it. There's more to life than survival. You deserve to live fully, to dream, and to achieve." Maria felt tears prickling her eyes. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight she could scarcely describe. For the first time, someone had acknowledged not just her struggle, but her potential. Later that week, Maria and the man encountered another challenge. A neighbor, unaware of her situation, made disparaging remarks about her past. Assuming that she had compromised herself to survive, Maria felt a familiar sting of shame rising within her. The old fear of judgment, the weight of desperation, threatened to crush her. But the man stood beside her, speaking calmly and firmly. "Do not let anyone define your worth. She has faced difficulties, yes, but that does not diminish her dignity." The neighbor looked taken aback and fell silent. Maria felt a rush of relief, but more than that, she felt a sense of empowerment. She realized that honor and respect were not given by others. They were defended and protected by those who truly valued them. She had experienced kindness, protection, and integrity in its purest form, and it had taught her something she would never forget: that survival need not mean surrendering one's principles or self-respect. Over time, Maria's confidence grew. She began seeking work more actively, volunteering at small shops, helping with errands, and learning skills that could help her build a more stable life. Each step forward was a testament to her resilience and courage. And throughout it all, the man continued to offer guidance, support, and, above all, protection. His presence was a steady reminder that one could face the world with both dignity and determination, even in the face of hardship. One evening, As they walked back from the market, Maria spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "I never thought someone would see me for who I really am," she said. "I always expected people to take advantage or judge me." The man looked at her with quiet understanding. "It is easy to judge or exploit," he said. "It is harder to protect and respect. But that is what we should strive for: kindness, courage, and integrity. You have shown me that strength can exist even in those who struggle."
Ow.
Maria smiled, feeling warmth and gratitude. She realized that protection was not just about physical safety, but about shielding someone's spirit from harm. The man's actions had taught her a vital lesson: that honor and dignity were treasures worth preserving, that those who respected them were rare but invaluable. She felt a sense of hope that went beyond survival. Hope for a life filled with trust, respect, and possibility. Days turned into weeks, and Maria began to see tangible improvements in her life. She had a routine, a sense of purpose, and small victories that reminded her of her resilience. She no longer moved through life merely to survive. She moved with intention, with awareness, and with hope. And through it all, the man remained a guiding presence, offering support without expectation, protecting her when danger threatened, and allowing her to grow into her own strength. The most important lesson Maria carried with her was the understanding that true protection did not require grand gestures or heroic acts. It was quiet, consistent, and rooted in respect. By shielding her from harm, standing up for her when others doubted her, and treating her with dignity, the man had given her something far greater than food or shelter. He had given her back her self-worth. And so, Maria continued her journey, strengthened by the lessons of those weeks. She faced the world with a newfound courage. Carrying the memory of the man who had protected her honor when it was most vulnerable, she knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer alone, and she was no longer afraid. The story of her survival had transformed into a story of resilience, hope, and the quiet power of integrity, a story that would guide her for the rest of her life. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet rhythm, a steady routine that gave Maria a sense of stability she had longed for, but never thought she could have. Each morning, she woke before dawn, the soft light filtering through the small window of the shelter. The city outside was beginning to stir, the streets filling with the sounds of vendors preparing for the day, children laughing, and the distant hum of life moving forward. Maria had learned to pay attention to these small details, finding comfort in the ordinary sounds that reminded her the world continued, and she was a part of it. The man remained a constant presence in her life, though he never imposed himself. His guidance was quiet, practical, and respectful. He would sometimes walk with her to the market, offering advice about small tasks, or help her find work that would provide not just money, but a sense of accomplishment. He never demanded gratitude or repayment, only that she continue to care for herself and move forward. Maria had begun to understand that his presence was not a burden but a support, a steady anchor in a life that had once been adrift. One morning, Maria decided to try a small job at a local bakery. It was nothing extraordinary, sweeping floors, helping with deliveries, and arranging baked goods, but it was enough to give her a sense of purpose. She arrived early, her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. The smell of fresh bread and warm pastries filled the air, and for a moment, Maria allowed herself to imagine a life where these simple moments could bring joy rather than hunger. The bakery owner, an older woman with kind eyes, welcomed Maria warmly. She seemed to sense the cautious hope in Maria, the way she moved carefully but carried herself with quiet determination. "You'll do fine here," the woman said. "Just take things one step at a time." Maria nodded, grateful for the encouragement. She had learned that small victories mattered, and the kindness of others could make an enormous difference in one's sense of self-worth. Throughout her time at the bakery, Maria's confidence grew. She learned to manage tasks efficiently, interact with customers politely, and take pride in her work. She began to feel a sense of accomplishment that she had not experienced in years. Her mind, once consumed by survival, now had space to think about learning, improvement, and even small joys. Each day brought a subtle transformation, a shift from desperation to purpose. From fear to hope, the man continued to support her, not by doing things for her, but by encouraging her to take initiative and trust in her abilities. He would check in occasionally, offering advice or guidance when necessary, but mostly allowing Maria to navigate her new responsibilities on her own. She began to understand that true support was not about control or interference, but about presence, encouragement, and respect. The man had taught her, through his actions, that she was capable of building a life beyond immediate survival as days turned into weeks. Maria also began to rebuild her social connections. She met other people in the bakery, neighbors, and even some of the local children who were drawn to her gentle presence. She shared small acts of kindness, offering help when she could, and in return received smiles, greetings, and appreciation. These interactions were simple, yet they carried immense weight. Maria realized that connection, community, and small gestures of care were as vital to survival as food and shelter. One afternoon, Maria walked through the town square, reflecting on how far she had come. She had been a stranger in her own city, invisible and vulnerable, but now she was seen, recognized, and valued. She thought of the man who had offered her protection and guidance without judgment. She realized that his belief in her worth had been a turning point, allowing her to begin rebuilding not just her life, but her sense of self. It was a quiet transformation, but one that felt monumental. Maria began to explore other opportunities for growth. She visited the library more often, reading books on practical skills, communication, and personal development. She asked questions, took notes, and practiced what she learned in her daily life. The man encouraged this curiosity, reminding her that knowledge was a tool she could use to shape her future. Maria began to dream again, not in grand, unreachable ways, but in small, practical ways that made life feel fuller and more meaningful. One day, as she walked home from the bakery, Maria noticed a group of children playing near a fountain. Their laughter was infectious, and she paused to watch them for a moment. She realized that joy could exist even amidst hardship, that life was not only about struggle. She began to think about giving back, about helping others who were struggling as she had once struggled. The man had shown her the power of kindness, and she wanted to extend that same compassion to others in need. Maria's small acts of generosity began to ripple through her community. She helped a neighbor carry groceries, offered guidance to a younger girl who was struggling in school, and even shared some of her knowledge from the library with children in the neighborhood. Each act, no matter how small, reinforced her sense of purpose and connection. She began to understand that rebuilding her life was not just about personal survival, but about contributing to the world around her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maria sat with the man outside the shelter. The air was cool but comfortable, and the quiet of the evening offered a chance for reflection. "I never thought I would feel this way again," Maria said softly. "I thought my life would always be about fear and survival. But now, it feels like there's more." The man nodded, smiling gently. "You've done the work," he replied. "You've taken the lessons and built upon them. You're learning that life can be lived with dignity, hope, and purpose." Maria thought about the journey that had brought her here, the days of hunger, the nights of fear, the moments of despair. She remembered the morning she had first approached him, unsure, anxious, and desperate. And now, she felt a sense of empowerment, a realization that she could face the world without fear of exploitation or judgment. She had learned to trust herself, to recognize her own value, and to embrace opportunities with courage. The man's quiet guidance had also taught her something important, that protection and support were most powerful when offered without expectation. He had not demanded repayment, nor had he sought recognition. He had acted out of principle, helping her to reclaim her dignity and giving her the tools to rebuild her life. Maria realized that his actions were not only a gift to her, but a model for how she could treat others in turn. Over time, Maria's life began to stabilize further. She had a steady income from the bakery, access to books and learning resources, and a growing network of supportive relationships. She felt confident in navigating her environment, making decisions, and facing challenges. And through it all, the lessons she had learned about integrity, kindness, and protection remained with her, guiding her in every choice. One afternoon, Maria received news that would mark another milestone in her journey. She was offered a small scholarship to attend evening classes at a local community center, providing her with an opportunity to develop skills that could further her independence. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was a chance to grow beyond survival, to build a life that was stable, fulfilling, and full of possibility. She knew it would require effort, dedication, and courage. But she also knew she was no longer alone. The man encouraged her to accept the opportunity. "This is a step forward," he said. "You've already proven your strength and resilience. Now you can expand your possibilities." Maria nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She realized that the journey she had begun months ago was continuing, now guided by purpose and opportunity rather than desperation and fear. She felt ready to embrace the challenges ahead. As Maria prepared for her first class, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood that life's hardships were inevitable, but the way one faced them could transform the outcome. She had learned the value of courage, the importance of protecting one's dignity, and the power of kindness. She had learned that true support came from those who offered guidance without expectation, and that trust could be rebuilt even after hardship. Maria also understood the importance of giving back. She had experienced what it meant to receive compassion and protection in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Now, she wanted to offer the same to others, to help, guide, and protect whenever she could. Her journey had taught her that life was not only about survival, but about building connections, fostering hope, and creating opportunities for herself and those around her. And so, Maria stepped forward into this next chapter of her life with quiet determination. She knew challenges would come, but she felt equipped to face them with resilience, courage, and integrity. She carried with her the lessons learned from the man who had shown her that honor and dignity were treasures worth protecting. She understood that survival was no longer her only goal. She could now aim for growth, fulfillment, and the quiet joy of contributing positively to the world around her. Through these experiences, Maria began to transform fully from someone who had merely survived to someone who could live with purpose, compassion, and hope. The months that followed were a period of quiet transformation for Maria. Her days were no longer defined by the urgent, crushing need to survive, but by the steady rhythm of building a life she could be proud of. She still faced challenges, but they no longer seemed insurmountable. Each morning she awoke, she carried a sense of purpose that had long been missing from her life. A recognition that she was no longer merely reacting to circumstances, but actively shaping her own future. Her routine had settled into something both practical and comforting. She continued her work at the bakery, where she had gained the respect and friendship of her colleagues. The tasks that once seemed menial now held meaning, arranging the baked goods neatly, helping customers with a polite smile, and ensuring the small shop ran smoothly. It was work, yes, but it was also a space where she could exercise responsibility, pride, and skill. With each passing day, her confidence grew. She felt the weight of despair lifting from her shoulders. The classes at the community center added another layer to her transformation. Each evening, she absorbed new knowledge, learning practical skills that could help her secure a more stable future. She studied diligently, taking notes and asking questions, eager to make the most of the opportunity. The joy of learning, of expanding her understanding of the world, was intoxicating. She began to see possibilities where before there had only been obstacles. The idea that she could dream and achieve, not just survive, slowly took root in her mind. Through all of this, the man remained a steady presence, offering guidance without interference and encouragement without expectation. He never took credit for her progress, nor did he push her to move faster than she was ready. Instead, he celebrated each small victory with quiet affirmation. When she succeeded at a task, learned a new skill, or simply faced a day with courage, he acknowledged it without fanfare, teaching her that self-worth came not from external approval, but from recognizing one's own growth and resilience. One crisp morning, as Maria walked through the bustling streets on her way to the bakery, she noticed the same quiet kindness in the people around her. She had begun to notice the smiles of shopkeepers, the greetings of neighbors, and the small, unnoticed gestures of goodwill that created a network of care in her community. Each interaction, however brief, reminded her that life could be lived with dignity and mutual respect. She felt connected to her surroundings in a way she never had before, part of a larger tapestry of human experience that went beyond her own struggles. Maria's thoughts often returned to the man who had guided her through the most difficult chapter of her life. She remembered the day she had first met him, the way he had refused to take advantage of her desperation, and how he had offered protection and guidance without judgment. That moment had been a turning point, a lesson in humanity that would stay with her forever. She realized that his kindness had not only saved her from immediate danger, but had taught her to see herself as worthy of respect and capable of growth. As she reflected on her journey, Maria began to act on the desire to give back. She found ways to help others in her community, small gestures that could make a real difference in someone's day. She assisted a neighbor with grocery shopping, offered tutoring to a child struggling with schoolwork, and shared practical advice with women who were facing challenges similar to those she had once faced. Through these acts, she discovered the satisfaction of contributing to the lives of others, the fulfillment of using her experiences to help someone else navigate theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Maria sat with the man on a quiet bench near the shelter. The air was cool, filled with the gentle hum of life, winding down for the day. She spoke softly, her voice carrying gratitude, reflection, and a sense of completion. "I never imagined I could feel this way again," she said. "I thought my life would always be about struggle and fear. But now I feel hope, purpose, and even joy. I have you to thank for teaching me that kindness, protection, and respect are possible, even in a harsh world." The man listened quietly, a gentle smile on his face. "You did the work," he replied. "I only helped you see what was already inside you. Strength, courage, and the capacity for growth were always yours. You needed only someone to remind you." Maria felt a warmth in her chest, a deep understanding that her journey was not about someone rescuing her, but about discovering her own power with the support of someone trustworthy. The following days brought new opportunities and challenges. Maria continued her education, practiced her skills, and embraced her work with renewed dedication. She found joy in simple moments, the aroma of bread in the bakery, the laughter of children in the streets, the satisfaction of completing a task well. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in her own capability and resilience. She realized that life was no longer just a series of obstacles to endure, but a series of choices she could make with intention, dignity, and hope. As she gained stability, Maria also began to explore her personal growth beyond practical skills. She discovered new hobbies, such as writing in a journal, sketching the scenes around her, and even attempting to capture her thoughts and dreams in small stories. These activities, while quiet and private, allowed her to process her experiences, express emotions she had long suppressed, and celebrate the progress she had made. Creativity became a source of healing, reminding her that life could be not only survived but also appreciated. One afternoon, Maria helped a young girl at the community center, teaching her how to read aloud with confidence. The girl looked up at her with admiration and gratitude, and Maria felt a sense of fulfillment she could hardly describe. She realized that her own journey of receiving guidance and protection had equipped her to provide the same for others. It was a moment of profound satisfaction, a reminder that the lessons of her past could ripple outward, touching lives beyond her own in quiet moments. Maria reflected on the lessons she had learned about resilience, trust, and integrity. She remembered how fear had once dominated her decisions, how desperation had threatened to compromise her dignity, and how she had thought survival required sacrifices she could not bear. Now, she understood that courage did not mean acting without fear, but moving forward despite it. She realized that true strength came from maintaining dignity, making thoughtful choices, and seeking help when it was offered with respect. The man remained by her side, not as a controller or overseer, but as a guide, mentor, and and friend. His presence had taught her that support could be given quietly, consistently, and without expectation of repayment. Through his actions, Maria had learned the value of integrity, compassion, and the quiet courage required to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She carried these lessons into every interaction, every decision, and every opportunity for growth. One evening, as the town settled into a peaceful quiet, Maria took a walk through the park. Reflecting on the journey she had traveled, the hardships of the past were still present in her memory, but they no longer defined her. She had transformed her life, rebuilding it with effort, courage, and the guidance of someone who had shown her respect and protection in her most vulnerable moments. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for the help she had received, but for the opportunity to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her hope. Maria realized that survival was only the beginning of a larger journey. Life was about more than enduring hardship. It was about growth, connection, and the quiet power of kindness. She had learned that one person's actions could change another's life profoundly, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, respectful care. The man had shown her that compassion, integrity, and protection were not just ideals, but practical tools for rebuilding life and hope. As the months passed, Maria continued to thrive. She graduated from her classes, gained more responsibility at the bakery, and expanded her circle of supportive relationships. She found joy in daily accomplishments, beauty in ordinary moments, and satisfaction in helping others. Her life had been transformed, not by sudden fortune or luck, but by courage, resilience, and the quiet, steadfast support of someone who believed in her worth. On a peaceful evening, Maria sat with the man one last time to reflect on her journey. She felt a deep sense of closure, accomplishment, and gratitude. "I am no longer afraid," she said softly. "I can face the world, not just to survive, but to live. I can dream, learn, and grow. I can help others as I have been helped. All of this is because someone saw me, respected me, and guided me." The man smiled quietly, his eyes reflecting pride not in himself, but in Maria. "You did this," he said. "All I did was remind you of your strength. You chose to grow, to persevere, and to reclaim your life. That is what matters." Maria felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was prepared to face them with courage, dignity, and integrity. And so, Maria's story concluded this chapter not with fear or desperation, but with hope, gratitude, and a profound sense of empowerment. She had transformed from a young woman struggling to survive into someone who could live with purpose, compassion, and strength. She had learned the value of trust, the importance of protecting one's dignity, and the